Okay. Now, hello guys. This is Ajit here. I'm going to be presenting like an overview of the development of D'Alembert principle. The original idea was to show you guys like a D'Alembert principle and then eventually your Hamilton's principle. But then I decided to just go through D'Alembert's principle and the development to it from the very basics, from principle of virtual work, and which would develop itself by learning about the important constraints in it. So, as the title suggests, it's going to be a problem that's going to be, developed from a static to a dynamical one. Now, contents here are simple. We have a little bit of history, not much. We are going to talk about constraints. We're going to develop the definition of virtual displacement and virtual work. Then we're going to develop the virtual formal definition also of virtual work. Then we're going to develop D'Alembert principle, and then Lagrange equation. We're just going to get a very little overview of it, and then there's just going to be some, summary or so. So, history. Now, what do we see here? We have three important figures to worry about here. Care for Johann Bernoulli, D'Alembert, and Lagrange. Now, what did Bernoulli do? Well, Bernoulli was the one who started to work and systemize the principle of virtual work. Now, he introduced a concept called infinitesimal displacement, which we will learn about now. D'Alembert, he looked at that principle of virtual work that Bernoulli developed and thought, hey, this is good, but it can only be used for static problems. So he wanted to use it for solving dynamical problems. And then there's Lagrange. What did Lagrange say? Lagrange say that yeah, your problem is efficient, but I want to like make it more powerful, and I want to like take care of any constraints whatsoever that are holding down my coordinates by using a generalized coordinate. And he utilize all these principles to come up with his Lagrange equation. So we are going to start with very basic definitions. This will not take a lot of time. First of all, constraints are of two types. One is holonomic constraints and non-holonomic constraints. To like put it formally, holonomic constraints have the form as such, where you have a function with r1, r2 to Rn, which are coordinates of particular particles, and then there's also t dependence, which could be there and could not be there. Now, what's important is it is equal to 0. Now, the thing is, you define any number, any equation, you can always take all the coordinates and the time dependent parts to the left hand side and equate the right to 0, which is simple. Now, holonomic constraints definition isn't just limited to this. We also need to care about a lot of factors like that C at number of constraints doesn't end up becoming more than the degrees of freedom, or that the constraint itself is differentiable, giving us a differentiable equation. But this is the basic of it. Now, holonomic constraints are that. What is non-holonomic constraint? Non-holonomic constraint is basically any which is not holonomic. Yeah. This is just the basic definition. Anything that you don't see here is going to be non-holonomic. And to put it simply, it's going to not follow any inequality. And why is that important? Now, why is defining a constraint important at all? The thing is, whenever you talk about constraints, whenever you talk about anything, any physical problem, you want it to help you solve it. You want any tool to help you solve it. So, holonomic and non-holonomic constraint basically mean useful and non-useful for the most part. So, we are going to use holonomic constraints, which are going to be useful for us and actually solve physical problems with it. Now, wait, you can actually see the pages progressing, right? Hello? You can see the pages
Yes, yes,
progressing?
yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Now, holonomic
Yes,
constraints.
yes.
Holonomic constraints are the useful constraints in bracket. Now, these are of two types, rheonomous and scleronomous. What are rheonomous? Time dependent. Scleronomous, not time dependent. Right now, these are just definitions and you do not worry about it. Their use would come in handy when you learn, when we will see that how constraints that are dependent on time and not dependent on time explicitly will actually affect the work so done by it. Now, I'm only going to be using two examples here, and these are the only two examples that we need to worry about, this one and this one. And I will develop my whole principle and go to Lagrange equation using these two principles, because we're just going to get one particular information from it, which is going to be very useful. Now, first example, a bead of mass m on a wire. Now we have a bead here, and then we have a wire. This wire is not going to change. Now it's inclined at an angle alpha. Now, this is your basic like ninth grade stuff. You have a normal reaction and then you have a gravitational force pulling it. You just equate the components, and then you also like put in a constraint equation, which is y equals to x tan alpha, which is coming from here. When you solve it, you get the equation of motion. We are not worried about equation motion. We are not going to be considering that. It's your basic Newtonian mechanics. You just get that. We have always been used to it. What's more important is finding how the constraint is affecting the work for the system and how it's contributing towards any work whatsoever at all. Now, when we see that normal constraint or normal force, when it acts towards a displacement in this system, because it's perpendicular, there is no work being done by. So work done by a constraint force is zero. Now, there's still not enough information here. So what do? We move on to the same example, but with a little bit of difference. We see what would happen if this wire starts like translating towards x direction, like this. This is your past, this is your future, and now this is going forward with a v naught velocity. Now we again develop the same constraint equation, but there's a difference. Early on, we had a DER component called cos alpha iota and sin alpha iota, which was denoting its movement along the wire. But now, the wire itself is moving forward. So we need to account for that. Because it's moving in x direction, we have an I cap here, or I cap bold I dot, and then we have v naught dot dt, which is going to give us the displacement towards x direction due to this velocity component. And the normal force, it shouldn't change, because it shouldn't. Now, when you find the work here, what do you find? You see that this is actually giving you a non-zero value. So constraint is actually doing some work in a system where the constraint is actually time dependent. Now this is worrisome. We just thought that constraint doesn't do any work. So why does it doing any work here? Now, don't worry about that. What we're going to do, we are going to utilize our previous knowledge that it doesn't do any work perpendicular to it. So what do? We let dt equal to 0. When we let dt equal to 0, we are saying that we are only looking at an instant, at an infinitesimal amount of time. At a particular instant, we're stopping the whole system. It's static. So what happens then? Dt equals to 0. dr, we are going to let it be delta r. This is the same component. And then when you find what's the work done by it now, because we know that it will equate to 0 eventually, this del Wn will give you 0 again. So what do we find? We find that work done by a constraint force along an infinitesimal or virtual distance is 0. We call it virtual distance because you're just stuck at a time, so you're just not going to move forward. You know that you need to move, but you're actually not like translating any distances because you're stuck in time. So we're going to consider it as very, very little. It's infinitesimal, it's just virtual. But for all purposes, we know this statement now, that work done by a constraint force along infinitesimal distance is 0, and we need to exploit it. Now, revision. With a moving rod, constraint forces actually do some work on the rod. This contribution comes from new velocity component, but the old part of the equation can be separated, and we find that it has done work equal to 0, the old one. Effectively, this same result can be obtained if we let dt equal to 0, which is what we did. Now, we're going to look at a formal definition, which I just copied from Goldstein's classical mechanic book. Now, you don't need to be worried about the jargons here, but a virtual displacement of a system refers to a change in the configuration of the system as a result of any arbitrary infinitesimal change of the coordinates. Delta Ri, which is the virtual displacement, consistent with the forces and considered imposed on the system by delta T at any given instant. So this is giving us at any instant T means dt equal to 0, and this is work for delta Ri by any given constraint force. That's it. We don't know what the definition of virtual work is properly right now. So we're just going to give it a layman definition. Any work done by a force along a virtual displacement. There's a typo here. Sorry for that. Needs further development. No, this definition needs further development. So we're going to develop principle of virtual work. Now, what I'm going to do is make everything, this whole system, easy for me. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to pretend that there's this particle. There's a lot of particles, but this particle is not experiencing any force. So it's in equilibrium. Any system that's in equilibrium, it's called a static system. I'm going to consider all the all the particles in the system, or the system itself is in equilibrium. So all the forces experienced by all the particles should be 0. Now, anything you take a dot product with this is going to give you 0. So we're going to explore that and have it take a dot product along an infinitesimal direction, which is going to give us a work along the infinitesimal displacement for this force. Now the thing is, for all particles, we're just going to take the summation. This is nothing very difficult. But what we do need to do now, we need to develop a principle, right? Now we need to look at this more carefully. We are going to divide this force into two parts. One is the actual work. Actual work, like let's say you punch someone, that's you actually like putting in some force into it. Now, what's the other bit? It's your constraint force. Now, what is constraint force? Anything that's going to like keep your system at place, at position, like balance it and stuff, which is like sort of keeping you in place and stuff. So this is your constraint force. We're going to divide it in two parts: applied and constraint force. Now, when we do that, we get to this equation. Now, we still don't know what to do with it. But the thing is, we had developed this statement that principle of virtual work. That constraint forces don't do any work along infinitesimal displacement. So Fi dot delta Ri for all the particles should be 0. What does it give us? It gives us this statement, which is delta Fi or delta Ri is equal to 0. This is our principle of virtual work. That for all the applied forces doing any work along the infinitesimal displacement, the total work done is 0. Now, important points Fi used here cannot be equal to 0. Why cannot it be? Because delta Ri all can be constrained, like they're constrained down and we don't know if they're independent. Now, this is a good way to deal with static systems. Now, we want to convert it into generalized coordinates. And this like problem is usually used by engineers because it's very good for dealing with static systems. So anything, that's like a constraint, like a structure, a building, this principle of virtual work is beautiful there. Now, principle of virtual work to D'Alembert's principle. Why would we want to do that? Now, why? To solve a problem that's actually dynamic. Now, we said that principle of virtual work is good for static problems. D'Alembert's problem, Brilliant's principle, is something that is going to also deal with dynamical problems. Now, how do we do that? We are going to exploit the original equation with an added inertial force, then changing the equation back to the static one. What does this mean? Now, before I go further, do you guys remember, like back in the days when you used to solve problems in inertial frames, what we would do if we don't know, we don't understand how a force is being acted on a particle, or like, let's say, like you're in a bus and there's this stuff hanging from the ceiling, and with respect to you, when the bus turns, the stuff is like moving left or right, but in your reference frame you're just confused, you don't understand anything about it. So to justify it in your reference frame, you're just going to add some force to it, and then you solve it, you can actually get the real acceleration so that was experienced by the bus itself. So we are going to utilize the same and exploit it. What do? We take the same whole force and equate a pi dot to its right. This is the same bit. We don't know what pi dot is, but we are going to exploit it. Now you take it to the left. Now you get Fi minus pi dot. What does this mean? This means that we are again, from considering a dynamic problem, we went back to actual and static problem because the right side is 0. So you went back to the principle of virtual work again, which was dealing with static problems. And you're going to use that to make an equation that's going to deal with dynamical problems. Look at how like nuanced it is. You're like exploiting a static system or making a dynamic system into static one so that you can come to a principle that actually supports dynamical systems. Now, Fi is actually applied force. Pi dot is your reversed effective force. Again, jargons. What do you need to worry about? This is just, an inertial force. Now, when you like substitute it because it's equal to 0, you're just going to take its dot product with delta R. You should again get 0. And then you like take the whole summation. Fi is again summation of applied and constraint force. And we knew that the constraint force don't do any work. So it again goes to 0. What do we come back to? We see that summation of your delta I subtracted by inertial force, and it's by calculating its work along an infinitesimal displacement for that particular particle, for that particular I, summing that all over gives you 0 again. Now this is D'Alembert's principle. Now what did we do? We successfully developed a principle capable of handling dynamical system from a principle that was only capable of handling static problems. We could have handled like dynamical problems as well, but it's just not like built in veins. Now what now? Is it enough? Problem. This also has a problem. The virtual displacement here are not necessarily independent. Now why do we want it to be independent? Because if they were independent, we can equate all the coefficients to 0 independently. What does that mean? Like convert the we are going to like solve this and convert all the displacement to generalized coordinates, and then we are going to take all the coefficients to 0. Now what is it going to do for us? This is where the development of Lagrange came into picture, and he wanted to make this D'Alembert's principle into an even easier and more powerful like equation or so. Now, for the development of Lagrange equation, we are just going to like look at our usual definition: R equals to R, QI1, QI2, QI2, and so on and so on. So now QIs, they're all generalized coordinates. T, well, we are saying that R is also dependent on time. Now R is, R particles. R is the, all the separate particles and their actual coordinates in the physical systems. We don't know if QI will actually, represent something physically, world, but they are their own, like in their own coordinate systems, and they're going to like represent us regardless in the end. Now using these, we get delta Ri dot equals to summation of del Ri by del Qi dot delta Qj. You would ask, why is there not a delta T term here as well? Because there's delta Qj, right? Now the thing is, we knew that this in this case we are actually developing this from Leibniz principle, which is developed from principle of virtual work, where you don't consider dt to be actual, to have some actual value. So dt should be equal to 0 again from principle previous like understanding. So what are we going to do is put this delta Ri and solve for individually here. Now when you like take dot product of Fia, which is you're going to drop the subscript. It's just it doesn't mean anything anymore. So you're just going to drop the subscript, and when you like take a dot product, you manipulate it. Don't worry about the calculus, but eventually you will come across this qj dot delta, I mean dot product delta qj. Now this qj you're going to define as generalized force. Now this qj did not necessarily have the same dimension as a force. This can be anything. This can be torque or some other quantity, but it defines a generalized force. Now the thing is, for the right hand side pi dot, you're going to do the same thing. Now in this bit, the equation, it's the manipulation is a bit more tedious, but in the end, what's more important is you are able to come to a form where you can take all the like independent coordinates, independent generalized coordinates to the right, and there's a summation, and then there's this like coefficient bit. We knew we wanted something which can simplify things further by having your generalized coordinates being independent. When we did that, we can have all this be equated to 0. This should vanish for individual virtual displacement. Now, what happens now when you equate this to 0? But before that, we need to solve for Qj. Now, Qj is generalized force. Now, you're familiar with, representing your force as a negative gradient of potential. You put that in this equation. Now you manipulate it, gradient by delta R by delta T. You come to this form of Qj being a negative gradient of potential in your with respect to your Qj's, with respect to your generalized coordinates. Now, what's important is after you substitute this, you come to this form. There's this dt d by dt del t by del q dot j minus del t minus v by del q dot equal to 0. But this is not like very beautiful. The left hand side doesn't look this individual term doesn't look the same as this one. So we are going to like manipulate it a little further. We try to like bring in a potential term. We are going to like, we already have a potential term. We are going to say this potential is only dependent on, I mean, it's dependent on anything, but it's not dependent on your generalized velocities. So it can be dependent on your generalized position. It can be dependent on your generalized time. When time isn't generalized, it's just time. Sorry. So it's not dependent on time. It's not dependent on your generalized. I mean, it's dependent on time or generalized coordinates, but it's not dependent on your generalized velocities. So you just add v, and then when you like eventually you will let this term be equal to L, which is t minus t, and this is something you're very familiar with classical mechanics. You get to this form again, which we usually derive using Hamilton's principle or principle of least action. But what we find here, we got to this using D'Alembert's principle, which was exploiting your principle of virtual work. So it's beautiful. It actually denotes like how no matter the path you go down trying to explain a principle, eventually nature leads you to something very unique. Now d by dt del L by del Q dot minus del L by del Qj is something we are mostly familiar with as your Euler's-Lagrange principle, but it's more like very first form was just called Lagrange's equation. So for like a development from D'Alembert's principle, that is. Now, just a little bit of summary, important points in discussion. Realizing constraints of different types, we define constraints. Checking dependence of constraints, we checked how the work and constraints are related. Defining displacement, virtual work, which we did, and we used that to develop our principle of virtual work for applied forces on virtual displacements. And eventually we built D'Alembert's principle for solving dynamical systems from principle of virtual work, which was only for static systems. And then using these generalized coordinates for developing, we use this generalized coordinates for developing Lagrange equation. So, this is just it. So yeah, thank you.